Here we go. I think that's recording. Okay. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to start our little series about returning to school and talking about healthcare and how to prepare for the winter that's coming, because we've already had a bit of an interesting year. So I wanted to introduce you to Dr. Simon Billings, a colleague who is practicing in Southampton at the moment. And he graduated from ACC the year after I did. And then he began his own life journey through healthcare and created the Academy for Chiropractic Nutrition in 2018. So we're just going to touch base about things that you can do to help your family get ready for school and to get ready for the winter. Hi, Simon.
Hi, how you doing?
Okay, I'm not sure how to share a screen here. How do we do that? Okay, so there we go. Is that better?
Great, I can see you clear.
Okay, so do you want to maybe just run through a few of the key elements that we could talk about in terms of general health and supplements and all vitamin D information that we'll be sharing?
Sure, I think that the lowest hanging fruit there is the vitamin D one, because we have pretty good evidence that we know now in the middle of winter that 90% of the population will be either deficient, officially low, or in a range we would consider insufficient, which is sort of below optimal, would still be affecting your bone health. So if that's 90% across the board. That's if you're Caucasian. If you're anything other than Caucasian, if you have any Asian or African heritage, then it's 100% in the research. And also anybody who's maybe a little bit bigger, if your BMI is above what would be ideal, so if you're 2, 3, 4 stone overweight or more, then because vitamin D is a fat, your body will tend to keep the vitamin D in the fat and there's less in the blood. So there's quite good research there again. If you're obese, then the deficiency rates go up to 100% in the middle of winter. And so from about somewhere around now until the beginning of October, the ability of you to make vitamin D from the sunshine pretty much goes down to zero. Because the sun is just too weak. So you would need your shadow to make vitamin D. Your shadow should be shorter than you are, meaning the sun will be high in the sky. And it's quite strong. From September, October until about March to April, you just can't make any at all. So you have to rely, really in the UK at least, you'd have to rely on supplementation in order to maintain your levels in a good zone. And that's indeed one theory about why flu outbreaks occur in winter, because we know that flu is ubiquitous, is there the whole year round. At the moment, in fact, there's more people dying of flu than COVID. So it's there all year round. But one theory, at least, is that as winter encroaches, vitamin D levels come down. And because vitamin D is so profoundly important for our immune system, as our immunity drops, we then become exposed to the virus that's around, and it gets established, and that then starts breeding and can then cause a whole lot of problems. So for most of your adults, you're looking at between 4,000 to 5,000 units a day for an average size adult. If you're 3 or 4 stone bigger than you'd like to be, maybe add on another couple of thousand, so 7,000 or 8,000. If you're more than 4 or 5 stone overweight, you're at 10,000 daily. And then babies and children, it's just size dependent. So anything up to around 2 years, you want to aim for about 1,000 units. Now, remember, if you're feeding them formula of any kind or breast milk, so formula is already built in, so they're usually going to get enough up until they start weaning. And once they get big to around 1, they're having less and less milk and they slip into food only, then you need to make sure you're giving it directly. If you have any mums who are breastfeeding, it's critical that they supplement. If they're exclusively breastfeeding and they're not giving the baby supplements, and the NHS do recommend babies, if they're being breastfed, they do get supplements. So that has recently changed. But if they're exclusively breastfeeding, if they want to give the baby enough vitamin D through their breast milk, they should be taking around 6,500 units per day. And that's based on some really good research where they gave pregnant mums 6,500 units, 2,000 or 400. And they looked at the baby's blood level, not the mum's. And it was the 6,500 units that was needed in order to give the baby enough. So, and then you just scale it up as they get bigger. So by the time they're sort of, 5, 6 years old, it'd be a couple of thousand. And then it scales up. And by the time you hit teenage years, the teenagers are big these days. So they're usually pretty much on adult doses. A lot of big boys coming into my clinic. They're on adult doses then. And so you want to make sure, and that's all through winter. They need to be on that regularly. If they're poor at remembering to take it, and that's generally men, unfortunately, by half the equation, men and some children are not good at taking it regularly, you can do a weekly dose because vitamin D is a fat. It stays in the blood. So it's not like a water soluble like a B vitamin that will come in and out quite quickly. You could do a weekly dose. So say you were going to take 5,000 a day. If your husband is poor at taking them regularly, you could give him 35,000 once a week, and that would keep him at a good level, and it means you're guaranteed compliance.
That's really good to know, actually, because when you think of water-soluble vitamins, it tends to go right through you.
Exactly right.
In particular, so the D being a fat-soluble vitamin, that's a really important distinction.
Yeah, and then that's off the back. We know that vitamin D is critical for the immune system, and it's been well known to reduce the risk of flu and respiratory infections as a whole. And that's been then why we've been very interested in the high rates of Black and Asians dying from COVID. There's very clear association, and there's been a lot of suggestion, but within the general medical world, they like a randomized controlled study where half get vitamin D, half get placebo. Now, up until now, we haven't had that. So we have it, and that was published yesterday, and it was from Spain. And so half the group, everyone got quite a lot of drugs. They had antibiotics and hydroxyquinone and another one, I can't remember off the top of my head. So everyone got that. Then half the group got very high vitamin D levels, the equivalent of 35,000 units a day for a week, which is really, really high, well above what you could make naturally. And then the other half got placebo. And in the treatment group with vitamin D, they had a massive reduction in the need to go into intensive care. I think something like 96% less than the other group. They had around 50% of them going into it. So it was a massive, very clear reduction. So hopefully now I hope that will encourage the government to now start saying, get tested. But if you're of any other ethnicity than Caucasian, you should absolutely be taking vitamin D all year round, just simply because from an evolutionary standpoint, your ancestors would have been closer to the equator where there's lots of sunshine. At some point, ancestors migrated north. And then there's a mismatch simply from your genetics and your environment. And you have to then take supplements, or you're going to have a problem, not just with COVID and other things, but for cancer and strokes and heart attacks and bone health and depression and pain. Across the board, vitamin D tends to increase. When you're low in it, your inflammation levels rise up. And when you're inflamed, you age quicker. And that then tends to create a whole plethora of illnesses that will then subsequently be diagnosed.
Yeah, that's excellent information. That's so helpful. I know for our families, through the winter, we usually start mid-September and go straight through till April. Winter supplements for vitamin D in particular, because of that reason. The UK and Cornwall in particular is a very, very wet area for winter, as is actually most of the UK.
Yeah.
So what else would you suggest for some of the kids going back to school in terms of things parents can do to boost their immunity? Because obviously for us, as chiropractors, we're looking at creating better health and stronger bodies that adapt to the environment that they're in. So what else can we do supportive-wise, supplement-wise, or nutrition-wise to help them through the winter?
Just basic stuff. I would try and encourage them to drink water, not juices in the morning or even squash, just water. Mm-hmm. And if they're used to having flavored stuff, then maybe just a squeeze of lemon or lime, or maybe if they're used to having juice in the morning, you just start watering it down gently. So you go 75% juice, 25% water, and slowly switch it over.
Less sugar.
Less sugar, because that's not great for the immune system. And particularly the breakfast is always the tricky one, because it typically has been cereal or something very bread, which is it's there's not a lot of the reason they fortify cereals with vitamins and iron is because grains that make cereals typically don't have a lot of nutrients in them. So they're really just sugar. It's a long chain of sugar, but it's just sugar ultimately. So they have to fortify. So I would want to try and get a bit more fat and protein if you can. So it's hard with kids. So eggs are great in the morning. If they'll eat fish, salmon, depending on whether they're keen on smoked salmon, that's not that common. The other thing, if they really do like things like, so porridge is an easy one. I get that to my kids quite a lot because that's a slow release carbohydrate. And then what I will do is we'll make it with full fat milk, maybe put a tablespoon of coconut milk in there, or some cream to really fatten it up, some little saturated. Yeah, that's great. We need saturated fats are very important because the cholesterol and saturated fats, they're building blocks, a lot of hormones. But also then you can put in I put in a tablespoon of collagen into my kids' porridge. Okay. So collagen is the building block of all your connective tissue. So whether it's skin, ligaments, tendons, or cartilage, or indeed bone, your bone is cartilage. It's just that that particular cartilage has lots of calcium and magnesium and phosphorus on it, so it makes it very, very hard. But it's the same as what's in the skin, is just less minerals. It's just like different format. So, and we don't tend to typically eat nose to tail as our hunter-gatherer ancestors would. We typically eat just the muscle from the animal, and that doesn't contain any collagen or any of the building blocks for collagen particularly. So a tablespoon of collagen in the porridge gives you some protein for the building blocks, and it's a nice slow release carb, and you can top it up with fat with some coconut and some full fat milk and so on. So that just get some basics right, and as little as you can. I know this is very hard. I have kids, so I know it's extremely difficult. They're picky at the best of times. Wherever you can, you want them to eat, food in the sense of it looks like you get it and you eat the thing that it is. If you have to take it through a factory to make it edible, that's not ideal. Now, it's not never, and it's like I never give my kids ice cream if we do that and we have treat and other things, but it's just as best you can on a day-to-day basis, try and have some whole food in there as best you're able to. And minimize the sugar. I think that's a fairly big one. And also sweeteners, not a great replacement for sugar. I appreciate they're probably less bad potentially, depending on your view on it, but they're not great, and they can upset your ability to sense when you're full. And also it can affect the bacteria in your gut as well. That's another good one, important with the gut microbiome. We know that about 70% of our immune system lives in the gut. And so your healthy gut generally means a healthy immune system. So probiotics can be very useful, certainly in the short term, in boosting the immunity and helping your immune system kind of get a healthy gut microbiome get established in the gut.
Trying to get my kids to eat fermented foods.
How did that go?
Really good pictures of their faces the first time they tried sauerkraut and,
Yeah, I think you're
pickled carrots or things like that, but I keep trying to add little bits of things, and kefir. I made some cocoa kefir pops, ice lollies for Holly one time, and she got halfway through it and she's like, oh, Mom, you put that stuff in it. It took her halfway through before she realized. So,
I think
they don't trust me at all because I hide stuff in everything.
So I think maybe kombucha is technically a fermented food. You could try that. That's quite tasty, depending on the brand. Yeah. And the other thing I'm just doing at the moment is I have a farm that's made me a 90% minced beef with 10% heart. So I'm sneaking that into bologneses and things. Yeah. Try and get a bit of offal in, because I can't get them to eat liver. And I thought even liver pate, which I thought I might be able to get them to eat, currently is off the menu. So liver pate would be good if the kids would eat that. It's
yeah, I don't see my kids going there.
No. Again. Even if it's not liver pate, at least pate has quite a high fat and protein content, relative to other things you might put on, on oat cakes or something else. And also, if you're going to have butter, if you're okay with dairy, you want to get make sure it's butter in the true sense of the word. There's two brands that are really good. Kerrygold from Ireland, their animals are grass-fed, and that means that they're eating what they should eat, and they typically have a much better, the fat that's within the butter has more nutrients in it. So vitamin K, for example, K2 is in there. That's really important. And there is also one available from Waitrose and some Sainsbury's from France, which is grass-fed, and it's also raw. It's an unpasteurized butter. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I can send you a link for that.
Yeah,
but it's available in some Waitrose and some Sainsbury's, and it's very, very good. So you don't ever want to have any kind of margarine if you can avoid it, or even any kind of spreadable things, just butter in its true sense. And if people have trouble spreading the butter in the winter, I know it's a pain in the bum, if you get the butter and you just grate it a little bit on the cheese grater, it comes out and then you can spread it.
A helpful hint. Very helpful hint. Yeah, we go through enough butter that it's never ever in the fridge. It's just kind of in a little butter cake dish on the counter. So my kids are big butter heads, which is good.
The other thing for prevention, the one thing I always keep in my bag at work and I have at home is some zinc lozenges. So zinc, we know it's great for the immune system, and out of interest, one of the key symptoms of COVID is that they lose their sense of smell. Now that can also happen when you're zinc deficient. So there may be a link there potentially. Now zinc lozenges, the best one is a zinc acetate. There's only one company that makes that, and that's a company called Life Extension. You can get that at Life Extension Europe, I think .co.uk. It's called Enhanced Zinc lozenges. Now they're very big, very, very big. So I don't know whether smaller kids will be able to take them, but the idea is as soon as you feel a cold coming in and the virus is in here, you suck a lozenge every 2 hours. The zinc, that particular zinc, diffuses into the nasal area here, and the zinc inhibits viral replication.
Yes.
So that's a great way you can get in. I've stopped a couple of nasty colds right in the tracks because I was able to take them as soon as I felt it. I got in there quick. And the other thing I do, I'll take a mega dose of vitamin D. I'll take like maybe 50 or 100 international units, 50 or 100,000 international units in one hit. Now, because I've taken a big hit, I then don't take any for a couple of weeks. I just work out what I would have taken. So if I take a 50,000, then for me that would be, like 10 days dose. And the other one I tend to keep around is vitamin A in its active form. Retinol is the active form rather than beta carotene, which is a plant-based one. And again, I'll take a couple of days, 2 or 3 days of high dose, 50 to 100,000 units, and that can work very well as well.
Okay, it's interesting. I was listening to Sarah Myhill, Dr. Sarah Myhill, up in Wales at the minute, and she was talking about salt pots, which essentially is doing very similar to what you're doing with the zinc. So I have a saltaire pot, and I use a couple of teaspoons of sea salt, and then about 5 or 6 drops of iodine, liquid iodine in that. And it's the same thing where you're inhaling, because iodine kills viruses and bacteria on contact, that you're clearing all of the nasal passages and all the sinuses to knock off any kind of intrusion there. And that's been really helpful being in practice, because like many of us, we practiced all the way through lockdown for medical necessity and stuff like that, because we see a lot of carers and people that really need care to be able to care for the other people that live with them, disabled children and things like that. So that was really helpful for me to make sure that I was looking after myself, to make sure that nothing was getting past my immune system. So that's another easy way of doing it. And she also talked about using, instead of the toxic hand sanitizer, using coconut oil. Probably better for home than school, because it can be a bit manky, is mixing up the coconut oil and then adding more drops of the iodine into it. And as you come through the door, just washing your hands with that, which is actually quite a good nutrient support for your body, as well as being antibacterial and antiviral, so without causing harm. So that's an easy one for home. So I found that really helpful as well, alongside with the zinc. So.
I have another thing. I have similar stuff as well, and the other one I have a silver and zinc nasal spray, so I can just squirt it up. I can send you the link from that as well.
Great, yeah. So I will post for everybody. I'll post links below this so that you have all the information, rather than having to stop and start the video to write it all down. So we'll do that.
They're useful. I think the key thing is, if you feel something coming on, it's getting in there early. It's taking vitamin D for prevention of getting anything. Your immune system is robust. And if you feel something coming on, you've got to try and whack it on the head immediately. Once it's in, you have to kind of ride it out, I've found. No matter how much vitamin C or anything else I took, once it got established, you just got to suck it up and get on with it.
Yeah, rest. And that's the other thing that people aren't good at. And it's interesting, because with children in particular, and maybe as chiropractors who see a lot of children, we know that their behavior changes first. So if you're paying attention, you will see your normal, happy, bubbly child going out and doing whatever. And then all of a sudden they're a little bit off behavior-wise before they go down with something. So if you catch them in that stage, because they won't have any symptoms for the next maybe 12 hours, that's a really key point to be paying attention. That, and that's when I tend to keep my kids home, and I'll keep them home for a day, bump them up with all the good stuff, adjust them, and then literally whatever it was is either disappeared, or if it's going to go through, it'll go through in 24 hours instead of 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So really just paying attention to those signs. And I know as working parents, it's really difficult, because you can't just keep kids home anytime, but actually if you catch them in that pre-phase, it makes all the difference to them. And it saves all of you a lot of stress. So particularly with, every sniffle a child has in the next couple of weeks is going to have people freaking out a little bit, because it can just, coronavirus is a normal cold. So there we are. The other thing I'd recommend also, this is not a cheap product, but it's very effective, is there's a glutathione is a very powerful immune modulator, very powerful antioxidant, and also helps open up the airways and the lungs.
So it's sulfur based, so it tastes in supplement form quite unpleasant. But you can buy creams that you can rub on. So I use that with my kids. If anything comes on, I'll rub their legs with it before bed. They still complain about the smell because it does smell of rotten eggs, but it does work. I'll send you a link for that as well.
Yeah,
that is not cheap, because glutathione is a very expensive product in general, but it is, I do keep it around because it's so powerful and can really, really work very well as well. And you said something very interesting earlier about their children's behavior changing when they get poorly.
Yeah.
And that's something else that we try and talk about, certainly with my clients in clinic, is that when your child does become ill, that the, fever is not something to be feared per se. It's easy when they're not ill and to say, don't worry about it. I appreciate that. But it is a normal response. That's your immune system cranking up and activating the immune system. So it's all part of it, is to burn off the bug and to activate the immune system. So when a fever comes up, one of the first things that a lot of my clients want to do is they want to make the child feel better, which I understand. And they're also quite scared of having a fit. So it's not uncommon in children with fever to have fits. So what we did is we looked at the scientific literature, and actually I looked at the NHS guidance. So nice hand-down guidance to the NHS to follow. And we read that, and it's very, very clear in the NICE guidelines. They quite specifically say with children with fevers that you should not try to stop a fit by reducing fever. And say, if you're giving them paracetamol through Calpol, if you're doing it to stop a fit, that doesn't work. Now, that's counterintuitive because we know that Calpol will bring the fever down, and therefore you would think that will stop the fit, but that is not the case, and it's well documented in the research, and that's why it's guidance. Now, what happens is you can bring the fever down when they're ill, but then it will spike suddenly. If they're going to have a fit, they will spike, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And for that reason, they recommend not bringing fever down for the sake of bringing it down to try and stop fits. They do go on to say, if you want to make the child more comfortable, you could consider giving paracetamol. But I would just consider this, that when you're running a fever of 39, they will lie down and rest. And that is what they're meant to do, because your body's focusing on fighting the infection. It doesn't want you expending energy running around playing. If you bring the fever down with Calpol, and it does work very well, they will feel a lot better. And children will just run around because they feel better. But then they don't feel well the next day. And that's why these infections tend to go on for weeks and maybe end up with a round of antibiotics. And you get stuck in these vicious cycles. The antibiotics upset the gut bacteria, the microbiome. And we know when you've had one antibiotic, you're much more likely to get another one in the future. And you can get locked into a vicious cycle of antibiotics and steroids and all sorts of stuff. So I would say with that, if they've got a fever, make them comfortable by keeping them cool, keep them hydrated. They naturally fast often as well, and that's okay as well. It's only short term. I let them ride it. My daughter burns a fever very high and fast, 39, maybe up to 40. If it goes above 40, I might drop it down a smidgen. I don't want to flatten it. I just want to make it a little bit comfortable, just maybe she can get to sleep, that kind of stuff. But she burns high and fast, maybe a day, maybe two, and then she's just done and she's fine, and has always done very well with that. So I would encourage all of your members to be mindful of that it's not a bad thing. And also that if your child does have a fit, again, in the research, in the guidance from the NHS, having a fit has no long-term consequences.
Yeah.
So there's no
reset. It's hit its max, and it's just protecting the brain. Yeah. So
I do appreciate that. For everyone, that's going to be completely counterintuitive. It's going to be scary. Your child's going to suffer, and they are going to suffer a bit, but it is normal in the sense that they're going to feel poorly for a few days and then they're going to be fine. If we really aggressively put it down, we run the risk of letting it go on for 2 weeks of suffering and maybe end up being an intervention of antibiotics, and they're not innocuous antibiotics at all. We really know that now. They have real significant content that can last for quite a while. They really, really can. So they're not to be considered, not a risk. I think there's a balance there. So either scary as it is, let it run if you can. And often people are quite surprised that their kids burn high and fast, and then they feel a lot better within a few days. And then they tend to then get a growth spurt often after they've gotten over something. They're really
cognitively as well. There's a cognitive leap in a lot of kids after an illness. Yeah, it's interesting. And it's interesting as well, because when you look at, for our parents, that we've helped them manage fevers naturally, because I think the first time you go through it, it can be really scary, and none of us like to see our kids feeling poorly. But managing acute illness in the younger years is massively immune building for them. And it really does set them up for the later years when the hormones start interrupting and all that kind of stuff. And I know with Paul's, I had a remarkable experience with her where she had a bout of tonsillitis, and she was really poorly. And she had gone to school in the morning and she had been fine. And then she came home and she was like, oh, I fell asleep on the floor. And I was like, oh, you did? Didn't anybody know? The teacher let me sleep. And she came close to me, and even at 2-foot distance, I could feel she was burning up. I was like, didn't anybody check you for your temperature? And she's like, no, they just let me sleep. I was like, okay. So, but she was burning at 40 degrees, which was normal for her because she goes from 0 to 40 and that's just her. And so we adjusted her, got lots of fluids into her, some vitamin C into her. She slept for a couple hours and she held pretty solid for about 6 hours, and then adjusted her again and added a bit more. I used a little bit of colloidal silver as well with that one. We just put it for the back of the throat because it was so swollen, and cranial work. And literally within that 12-hour period, it was gone. She woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, totally broke the fever. All the tonsil stuff was gone. And I wish I had taken a picture because you wouldn't have believed it had gone from that to that in that short period of time. But she really just burned a hole through it. And she's like, right, I'm ready to go to school. I'm like, no, you're not. You're staying home with me for at least 2 days. But the post-viral, she just needed to sleep then to let her body recover. But she had killed off whatever that was. It was incredible to watch and how powerful her body was, you know, and just, again, managing the symptoms and making her comfortable because she wasn't happy. Her head hurt, her throat hurt, everything hurt, you know, but what she needed was me and lots of reassurance and, you know, all of that reassurance for kids that natural viruses are just part of life and we get stronger and we don't have to be afraid of them, you know, because I think fear is a really big factor as well. So in our family, we do use quite a bit of homeopathy as well. And that is not to suppress symptoms, but that is just to manage things, to make them more comfortable, you know, whether it's a wet cloth on the forehead or, you know, that kind of stuff, just to help manage things and increase comfort rather than suppressing them. So,
the other one I would suggest, just from a general health point of view, that I find a lot of clients are missing maybe is sleep. A lot of, not so much the younger ones always, but as they get towards teenage-ish, they are up really late.
Yeah.
So that is, you know, the hours before 12 o'clock, they're worth double. There's something magical about them. I don't know if that's when the growth hormone comes out or what it is, but if you go to bed at 12 and get up at 8, you feel a lot better if you go to bed at 10 and get up at 6. It's just disproportionate. So certainly for the teenagers, they need to get, the parents need to be in charge. That's another thing I found. Their teenagers seem to be in charge. Just turn the internet off. Then they're going to stop doing whatever. It's all internet. It's Netflix or gaming. They have to be in bed and get a good amount of sleep because that's when you heal and you can.
Yeah, we are really strict with that actually, and it's really funny because we're like those parents that, you know, we have like access to our kids' phones. The internet goes off. They have a set amount of screen time that they're allowed, and particularly during the week in school, you know, they're in bed a lot earlier in the week, and then we ease up on the Friday, Saturday a little bit, you know, which I think is a fair balance. But for that reason, and it's so funny that you say that because I'm listening to you and I'm hearing my dad through my whole teenage years, the hours before midnight. It's so true. So true. That's brilliant. So the last thing I wanted to touch on as well, unless you have more to add, was just talking about some vitamin C, because obviously in my growing up, because my family was massive into vitamin C, my dad in particular. So we've always grown up taking quite large doses of vitamin C. And I think that's one of my big power tools in our kit, actually, the powdered version of it that we take every day. In addition to the other stuff that we round out seasonally, depending on what support we need, you know, just to help our bodies. But aside from massive amounts of sleep, which is a really important thing in the winter, because we kind of need to hibernate. But
vitamin C is good. I mean, it's, again, with kids, I know it's slightly hard to get there. There's the fizzy tablets. They have a few things I'm not keen on, but it is what it is. Higher Nature do some, I think, some reasonable ones.
We use powder, and I just mix it in some freshly squeezed orange juice or apple juice, and just a little bit to get down. And that's easy for us, but
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, that's good. I'll try that one. So vitamin C is good. Yeah, the powdered one are usually like a ascorbate. So for adults, you can argue both ways. You go for high dose using, a magnesium ascorbate or ascorbic acid, or
Yes.
you could go more natural routes where you would have actually, because vitamin C is not just ascorbic acid, vitamin C has other things in it as well. So then you'd look at things like a cherry powder or something like that, where the doses you'll notice are a lot lower, but it's a more natural approach.
Yes, and you don't need a high dose with a natural one. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can play it either way. I've certainly used it in the past. I would say I've probably taken everything over the last 20 years trying to stay in practice so that so I can help people. But I think that the ones that I've used, I think vitamin C is great for prevention. But if you're going to feel anything coming on, that's where the vitamin D, the
Yes.
A, and the zinc lozenges are so good at getting in there and stopping it. That's the best success I've had, I think. The vitamin C and some of the other stuff, I think, is good for prevention.
That's what we
In the
mean
first
as well,
place.
to add to that. Yeah. As a preventer, and a general immune booster as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's great. So anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No, I think you mentioned when we were chatting before about elderberry. So that's quite reasonably well researched for influenza. So for flu, there's a product called Sambucol, which you can get, which is a liquid. So the kids will usually take that. It's very, very sweet. But that's
Quite high in sugar, that one, isn't it?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
it's
only
pretty
issue
sweet.
I have with it. Yeah.
Yeah, they do have some chewable ones, but then the dose becomes quite small. So it swings and roundabouts, like whether they'll take it or not. So that's another one to consider to have in the cupboard. For adults, the other one I like is I have garlic in the cupboard as a product called Allicin Max, which is very good. That's the only one that actually has the active ingredient in garlic still in the capsule, because most garlic capsules are garlic, not allicin, and allicin is the active bit. So it's called Allicin Max. You get that from that. I'll send you a link from Natural Dispensary. Very good value, and that's very good. It's very good for prevention again. Also can be quite useful for managing blood pressure as well.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, we have so many more things I need to kind of chat with you about. So, but thank you so much for your time today. I hope everybody's found this really helpful. And we're going to start adding some more talks through this as well, and kind of talking about safety and fear and the mental health as we kind of transition into a fall period with more changes coming with school and supporting our kids and things like that, and the general uncertainty. So there's lots of other discussions to be had. Thank you so much, Simon. I really appreciate everything.